So what is up, everyone? Michael Manatskanian here. I've been able to go from zero real estate as of May 2020 to over $30 million portfolio of real estate investments. But more importantly, they are the exact type of investments that you would want to own because they're the ones that not only give you the financial freedom and wealth building, but they're actually in alignment with like lifestyle goals. For example, it's one thing to make money, but it's a whole other thing to make it passively, especially with less and less of your time. So I'll expand on what I mean there, but this is the core reason why I invest in co-living real estate. Not only do I get much higher returns, both from the cash flow perspective and from the wealth building, as I'm buying properties making me $1,500, $2,000+ a month. Yes, a month in cash flow after setting aside $1,000 in reserves every single month. Not only is that the case, but I'm buying bigger, better properties in nicer markets, which allows for more appreciation and debt pay down. Well, all of that is a result of co-living investments. Because I'm buying co-living, I can get both the benefit of a lot of cash flow, very high cash on cash return, while also getting a lot of wealth benefits. Typically, you'd have to choose. Am I going to invest in a San Diego and get a lot of wealth? Am I going to invest in a small town in Missouri to get a lot of cash flow? Well, the thing about co-living is it turns that kind of on its head. You get the best of both worlds. But not only is it from the returns perspective why I love co-living, but it's also the fact that it aligns much more with my overall lifestyle goals. I'm not, if you've ever seen any of my trainings and webinars and things like that, my whole thing is that I'm not passionate about like houses. I'm not doing all this because I love houses. Like, that's not why I'm building a portfolio. It's quite literally if anything, I'd say I don't even enjoy houses. What I do enjoy is the financial freedom, the cash flow and wealth building that comes from each and every good intentional investment, as well as I do love the fact that every deal we do benefits my team, benefits all the people we work with, every service provider, every person we buy a deal from, and just as importantly, every single one of our tenants that are getting great, high quality, affordable housing. So with that being said, as a business owner, co-living is extremely beneficial when you have a portfolio of these properties. It's extremely beneficial because instead of buying $200 a month long-term rentals, where if my goal is $10,000 a month of cash flow, if I was doing that $200 at a time, I would need 50 properties. With co-living, let's go really conservative and just say we're making $1,000 a month of cash flow. Well, I'd only need 10 properties. It's a lot easier to find, analyze, put under contract, due diligence, fund, close, get rent ready, renovations, furnishings, and manage 10 properties over 50 properties. And not only that, even though we would get the same cash flow in that scenario, I'm able to do, you're able to buy 10 properties much more quickly and much more thoroughly than you ever could with 50. It doesn't work linearly like that. It's not like every property is the same amount of work, and adding more and more and more adds a lot more strain on your operations. So having less properties is a big part of it's a huge part of the benefits, or if your goal is cash flow, if you can get there with less assets, that's better. So for me, my goal isn't to get there through as many properties as possible. It's to get there through the most efficient portfolio possible, which is why I do the 3 C's. Co-living, right? I buy co-living properties, leveraging creative financing. So not only am I getting all the benefits that come from co-living, but I'm further improving those returns by lowering my down payments, by lowering my interest rates. That adds to my cash flow, that adds to my cash on cash return, further reducing the number of properties I need to own. If I'm able to, instead of 50 long-term rentals making $200 a month, if I can do it through 10 co-living properties making $1,000 a month, well, if I'm doubling the cash on cash return and cash flow by going creative and I'm getting $2,000 a month of cash flow, well, that means I only need 5 properties to achieve my goals. So not only is the journey much better and faster and much more efficient, but once you have your stabilized portfolio, it's also much easier to own and operate 5 properties than it is 10. Definitely a lot easier than 50 properties. So with all that being said, the reason why I love co-living is it allows for all those benefits financially. And then if you set up your properties well and you operate them with the right systems It also doesn't take your time freedom. There's no point of $10,000 a month coming in each month if you want to be financially free, if you have to dedicate way too much time and energy to each and every property. And remember, co-living, you may need less properties, but you might have the same number of tenants. Every co-living property I own has between 6 to 10 tenants. So if you have 5 of these, but 8, tenants per property, that's still 40 tenants. So it's really important to build your co-living portfolio with operations and systems in mind. So not only are you getting your financial goals, but you're balancing that effectively with your time goals. Today, what we're going to focus on is doing a co-living Q&A. I'm going to answer any and every question you all have about co-living. So whatever you guys have, please feel free to drop those in the chat. I'm happy to answer them. But I'm just coming off of an event where I spoke about co-living to over 100 investors who are serious buyers and operators. And then I even did a tour of several of my co-living properties. I went to Dallas after my event in San Antonio, took several investors with me, and we walked several of my properties. Those that I own and have been operating for a while, those that we've owned and just recently started operations. So it's rent ready. We just got it filled up with tenants. So just seeing kind of that stabilization. And then those that we recently put under contract are going through renovations as well. So with that, there was tons and tons of questions that came about, but I want to see what other questions you all might have that I can answer for you. One of the biggest questions that I get quite often, and this is really going to tie into what I was talking about for operations, is why do I choose to utilize the PadSplit platform when you could also just not utilize PadSplit? And for a lot of you guys, you may not know what PadSplit is. And if you've been following my trainings for a while, you might. I provide tons and tons of trainings on YouTube and in my free real estate freedom community in the school platform. I'll drop that link if you're not part of it so you can take advantage of all the free trainings and tools in there. But I'm going to break that down today. I'm going to expand on why I prefer co-living through PadSplit than not utilizing PadSplit. And that's actually going to be broken down into 2 core different reasons. I utilize PadSplit. I utilize the PadSplit platform for 2 reasons, both for acquisition. So before I buy a property, I'm utilizing PadSplit to help select markets, select neighborhoods, and analyze investments as much as possible. So I'm utilizing PadSplit when it comes to acquiring assets. Well, everyone thinks of PadSplit when it comes to managing a property. Well, that's part 2. Part 1, it's all about utilizing the data available from the #1 platform for rent by the room in our country to help me with deciding what deals I want to buy, what markets I'm going to buy them in, and then getting all the up-to-date data on analyzing those deals. That's one big piece. Well, the next piece is the operations. I utilize PadSplit because they support me having a systematized property management process for a very large portfolio that's also in multiple markets. And I'm going to expand on both of those. What we're going to start with first, is breaking down what co-living is and how what PadSplit really is. And then I'm going to explain to you not just what it is, but then how I actually utilize it within my business, right? Because it's one thing to know what a platform is. It's a whole other thing to know how to utilize it and maximize the benefits from it. So very simply, what is co-living? Co-living is taking a house and renting it out by the room. A lot of the time, you're not going to be able, and typically you're going to want a house to rent by the room that is between 6 to 10 bedrooms. Well, typically, you're not going to be able to find properties that are between 6 to 10 bedrooms in the markets that you want to invest in the locations that you want to invest in. For example, I love near downtown and major like in major cities, I love to be around downtown or other major employers like airports or military bases or healthcare facilities. So it's very difficult to find really large properties in those areas that are cost effective to actually be able to invest in those deals. So the way you get to the 6 to 10 bedrooms is not buying a property that's 6 to 10 bedrooms from the beginning. It's finding properties that are in a great spot, but they have the ideal floor plan to be able to convert them into 6 to 10 bedroom houses. So for example, I'll have a 4-bedroom, 3-bath 2,500 square foot property near an airport, and that's a perfect canvas for me to determine, can I convert the living room, the dining room, that office, that bonus room, maybe the garage? Can I convert enough of those rooms cost effectively that I am able to have that 6 to 10 bedrooms that I need to have an incredibly successful co-living investment? So simply, you're not typically buying a property that's going to succeed at co-living by just buying it and furnishing it. You're going to have to buy a property that has the right fundamentals and the right layout to allow you to create co-living, right? So you're not buying an investment, you're buying a property and you're creating an incredible investment through co-living. You have to convert the property to match that. All right. So that's what co-living is: buying a property, renting it out by the room, but instead of just renting it out as a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, or buying something that's 10-bedroom, 5-bath, what you're doing instead is you're buying a great property that has the right floor plan, has the right layout, and then you're creating a co-living investment out of it by converting the common areas to additional bedrooms. That is co-living in a nutshell. The thing to understand is that this is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal investment vehicle. However, as I just previously mentioned, co-living's phenomenal returns are slightly offset. Like the con, like the pro is this phenomenal returns, but the con, right, the downside is if you don't have the right operations and systems when it comes to owning and operating co-living properties, you might have financial freedom, you might be generating cash flow, but you're going to be stuck in an operational nightmare. So you might be financially free, but you don't have actual time freedom, or you're stuck doing work you don't enjoy. And the only way you're going to be able to get out of that is to have the right systems and operations in place, even delegate out the correct services to others, right? You may not, you probably don't need to be doing all the things that you need to do when it comes to the operational side of co-living. You just need to know, what do you need to do? What systems make it easier, faster, better? And then what areas should you probably delegate out to others? One simple example is when I was buying rentals, my first 27 rentals, I did almost everything on top of also being the bookkeeper and handling my own taxes. That's ridiculous in hindsight, because you could just pay someone to do bookkeeping and then pay the right CPA to do taxes. And they'll not only do it and save you a bunch of time on work that I dislike doing, right? That's not my joy, is sitting there and bookkeeping and handling tax stuff. Instead, I outsourced that, got time back, that then just went reapplied to growing my business further. But at the same time, even if you don't decide to invest that time back into your business to grow it, you need the flexibility to have that time to actually enjoy your life. There's no point of having money come in if you have to constantly be working or dealing with headaches. You can't even enjoy the freedom of your business. Why do I highlight that to so many of you who might be starting off with 0 co-living properties, or maybe a few before you're even ready to scale? Because the best possible time to set up the right systems is from the very beginning. If you already have several properties, it's harder to then go and change your systems and processes rather than just setting it up from the right way. This leads into PadSplit, my favorite platform for co-living. And I'm going to explain to you why, right? We're going to focus on how I utilize PadSplit to find properties and markets, or markets and properties, and analyze them. But I want to explain the operations piece first, because that's quicker. If y'all just give me 1 second. Awesome. And let me just put this into perspective again, right? So if your goal is 5 or 10 properties because you want $10,000+ a month of cash flow, like the example I gave earlier, if you have 8 units, 8 rooms per property, and let's say it's 10 properties, that's 80 tenants. Well, just think about that. If you don't have a good system, a good platform to help you find tenants, screen those tenants, approve those tenants, create leases for those tenants, communicate with each of them, collect rental income from each of them. If you don't have a correct platform or a correct system to be able to do that, that is 8 times 10, 80 different people you have to do that with over and over and over again. And every time you take on a new property, right, that's when there's the most operations, getting the property stabilized and full with your first round of tenants. So every property, there's a ton of work that goes into doing that, all that work yourself for 8 tenants at one time, right? Once a property is stabilized, it's not that hard as you're only dealing with turnover, one here, one there at a time. But even if it's one a month and for 10 properties, that's still 10 new tenants you have to find, screen, approve, create leases for, communicate with each of them, collect rental income from each of them. That's a lot of work. This is the exact void that PadSplit fills. PadSplit does not actually manage your properties. What PadSplit does is they make operating and managing your co-living investments much easier, but they're not actually a property manager. The best way to think about PadSplit is, once again, they are not a property manager. Instead, they are very similar to what the Airbnb platform is for short-term rentals. Although PadSplit itself, the platform, does not actually manage your tenants and properties, they make every single part of management easier. Like I said, think of Airbnb, what Airbnb does for short-term rentals, right? Vacation rentals. This is what PadSplit basically does for the rent by the room model. They help find tenants. That's their number one thing, is they're a platform for tenants to be able to come in and find your properties. If you have a short-term rental, a vacation home, think about it like this. When you list it on Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, you list your short-term rental on there. Well, the great part is that lots of people are searching on those platforms for that property. But if you weren't to utilize those platforms and you were to individually market your properties, well, you've got to create all these individual listings. You have to drive leads, drive potential tenants to those listings. And then operationally, it becomes quite the headache. Just like you wouldn't try to do a short-term rental without Airbnb, Booking, or Vrbo, it's the same thing, in my opinion, trying to do rent by the room without PadSplit. It doesn't mean you cannot find tenants without PadSplit. It just means in the markets that PadSplit dominates in, you're doing a massive disservice to your co-living business if you're not leveraging all of the marketing dollars that PadSplit pays to market to prospective tenants to understand rent by the room and their platform, and that are searching on that platform for your property. So although they don't actually move in tenants and handle the property management, their main thing is that they are marketing a lot of time and money. They're spending so much advertising dollars to support you in finding, placing, and managing your tenants much more effectively. This is even more beneficial if you are operating in multiple markets. For example, I have properties in Atlanta, Charlotte, Orlando, Dallas, Denver, so many different markets, but because it's all done through PadSplit, all of my properties are listed on PadSplit, and all of the finding, placing, and managing my tenants is done through one platform. If you were to solely operate in one market, you might find that there's a benefit and it's worthwhile to do all of the work to try to constantly drive your own individual rent by the room tenants to your own platform, your own site. However, if you're spread out or starting out, you definitely want the support from a resource like PadSplit to help you drive those tenants to your property, right? To at least make it visible. If there's 10,000 people searching and they're on the platform, they can search and see your property. Otherwise, you have to find some other way to get your rent by the room in front of those people. Well, not only is that more difficult, right, doing it individually, but you're also now competing with a major provider that like, if everyone's already looking there, they're less likely to look elsewhere as well. There's other platforms like this, but PadSplit head and shoulders above every other rent by the room platform. Like I said, the number one benefit, at least in my opinion, above everything else, is that the amount of marketing and advertising that they do to find rent by the room tenants in the core markets that PadSplit operates in. That's, I think, the number one thing that they do, is they are driving tenants who are interested in rent by the room to your properties. Well, once they do that, then your tenants apply, like the prospective tenants, the people looking for housing, they apply through the PadSplit platform. Then you're able to screen them both through the PadSplit screening, which is okay, right? I wouldn't say they're the best screening is what they do, but then you can do your own additional screening from those tenants that are coming in through the PadSplit pipeline for your property. So finding tenants, them seeing your property, them applying, them getting screened, then you further screen them if you choose to, like we do within my business. And if you decide that you want to move forward with a tenant, all the communication with that tenant occurs on the PadSplit platform. You don't have to have a new WhatsApp group, an email thread, a text group, individual text chats with 80 tenants or even 8 in one house. It's all done through the PadSplit platform. Well, instead of me having to create individual leases for 8 tenants, well, when a tenant utilizes the PadSplit platform, they're already in an arrangement with PadSplit. They're no longer seeking leases. They don't need leases. I lease my property out not to each of my tenants. I lease it out to PadSplit. Well, then PadSplit has the tenants on a membership agreement through their platform. Not only does that help with regulatory issues that some people are concerned with CoLiving, helps you circumvent certain occupancy laws. However, more importantly, I don't have to do all the operational work involved with gathering all the info, creating all the leases, getting them to sign it. All that stuff is done through PadSplit. If we approve, then it's done through PadSplit. We don't have to worry about those individual leases. Great. Well, now they're in our property, right? They're living there. Well, when they pay their income, right? When they pay every single month their rent, or they're not paying, right? Both of those, it's all visible through PadSplit. I don't have to set up individual payment portals or set them up as individual tenants on a turbo tenant or a rent ready or whatever. It's all done automatically through PadSplit. So the place that I use to find tenants, which is where PadSplit is spending almost all their money, they're not advertising to landlords like us. They know that we love They know that we love CoLiving because it's phenomenal returns. They're spending all that money marketing to tenants that are interested in rent by the room. So once they get all those people in a market, well, then that helps them find your properties, apply for those properties. You can screen them through there and independently from there, communicate with them as much as you need to through there, manage the leases or your members, and then manage the rental income collection. That's what PadSplit does. And their fee for that is they charge 8% of the total income generated in the property. They keep 8% of that income. In addition to that, they also keep the first 10 days of income when a tenant moves in. So basically, the first 10 days a tenant moves in, PadSplit keeps 100% of that. After that point, they keep 8% of the ongoing monthly income for that tenant until they move out. Someone new moves in, then it starts the 100% of the first 10 days and then 8% afterwards. To put that into a percentage to make it a little bit easier, that means they collect basically 33% of the first month tenant, move in, right? Because a third, 10 days of 30, roughly a third, 33%, and then 8% afterwards. But if you were to think about it as like just a single number, that basically translates to if you have a tenant stay for around 9 months at a time, that means you're basically paying 12% of the income to PadSplit. The combination of the 100% of the first 10 days and the 8% afterwards, right? That translates to around 12% if your tenants are staying, 12% of the total income if they're staying for at least 9 months. If they stay shorter than that, then your property management percentage of your income is actually higher because that first 10 days really impacted that more. Well, if your tenants stay longer than 9 months, then the percentage is actually lower than 12% because that first 10 days is what's eating it down. The lowest it could ever be is 8%, and the highest it could ever be is, well, actually, I don't know what it could be. Because they could move out after the first 10 days, so you gave up 100%. But in reality, that's that 12% for every 9 months. If your tenants are moving out faster than that, you're paying more. If they're staying longer than that, which we have several tenants that have been with us for a year, 2+ years at this point, it's much less than the 12%. Much less than the 12%. And on top of that, if you find your own tenants, so just because we have PadSplit in each market, we still also have our separate listings. If we're the ones to find the tenant and get them to apply through PadSplit, PadSplit doesn't keep those first 10 days of income. We get that like it was normal, just the regular 8%. So if you find your own tenants and get them to apply through PadSplit, you can save on that 10% or 100% of the first 10 days that PadSplit collects. So that's kind of the pricing model. And that's really what you're paying for. You're paying for the support with operations. And that is as a result of, for tenants, right? Getting tenants to find your property above everything else. That's the main value. Then they apply for it. You can screen them on there. You can get their leases set up on there, rental income collection set up through there, all the guest communication set up through there. That's what they support with operations, just like an Airbnb does. It's virtually the same thing. What they don't do in operations or property management is you still have to be the one responsible for all your tenant move in and move outs. If a tenant needs to move in, right? If a tenant wants to move in, you still have to coordinate the move in. If you need to change door codes, get a unit cleaned, have someone escort them there, even communicate with those tenants, you still have to do all of that. And if a tenant's moving out and you need to do a move out walkthrough, get the unit, get their room turned and ready for the next tenant, change door locks, you have to do that. That's why you have good service providers in a market, right? So similarly, if you need to send out contractors, cleaners, and service providers, just because they're communicating, the tenants are communicating with you on PadSplit, well, you still have to send out those service providers. If you need a handyman to repair something, a cleaner to do a common area cleaning, or a move in, move out cleaning, or other service providers, you need to go there to do landscaping and all that. We still have to do that. PadSplit doesn't do any of that. They're not managing your property, right? If you have tenants that are not paying and you need to follow up with them, right? PadSplit has some automations to get them to pay, but if you have to go through the full eviction process, you still have to do that. So simply, what you're paying PadSplit for is not to manage your properties. You're paying them to make it way freaking easier to manage your properties. On top of that, if you're like me and analytical, and especially you're operating in a couple markets, it's really the advantage is that I get every single property's data, right? Their income, what are we charging? How many are full, right? The occupancy, how much, who's paid, who hasn't paid, what are the reviews from our tenants on those properties? What are the reviews from our tenants in general about us? Everything is literally listed on PadSplit, whether it's a house in Atlanta, in Dallas, in Denver, whatever, it's all there on PadSplit. Just as importantly, people ask, well, you could kind of get something similar through property managers. So why don't you just use a full-on property manager that does all that stuff? Well, like I said, PadSplit's already driving a lot of prospective tenants to the property, and they're doing a much better job, in my opinion, than a lot of property managers do. That's why you can get property managers for you can get property managers to do all of the management, finding the tenants, doing all the stuff that I mentioned, whatever their platform is, whatever, they can do all of it instead of using PadSplit, right? The property management options for you really are, do you self-manage the whole thing or property manage the whole thing, right? Do you utilize PadSplit and then self-manage on the back end of PadSplit? Utilize PadSplit and have a property manage on the back end of it. So either you're using PadSplit with property management or doing it yourself on the back end, or you're not using PadSplit and doing all of it yourself or all of it property management. So the question is, why can't you just utilize a property manager who will just do everything so you don't have to do any of it? You can, but they tend to charge a lot of money anyway, 10 to 25% for pure PadSplit or rent by the room property management, where a lot of those that are on the back end of like PadSplit, if you're using PadSplit with property management, well, they're going to charge significantly less. Sometimes there's flat rates like $300 to $400 per house for property management. Sometimes it's a percentage that's between 3 to 10% of the total income on the back end of PadSplit. So you're still utilizing PadSplit to get the tenants and handle all those other things, but your property manager is now the one who's doing the back end work, right? Actually communicating with those tenants, coordinating the move in and move outs, coordinating the vendors like the contractors and cleaners and service providers, handling the evictions. That's how you create a business that is completely independent from the management. You still have to oversee the property management to ensure the success, right? By looking at the metrics, but that is how you create a business in which you are able to actually have not just financial freedom, but time freedom. You don't have to actually manage your tenants, right? That's a big part of it. Whether you're realizing, like I did early on, it's a disadvantage for me to manage my own tenants, A, because I don't enjoy it, and B, because that time is better spent finding more great investments and for me raising money for those investments? Well, that's the case for when you're building a portfolio. Well, after you have a financial free portfolio, that time is either spent enjoying your life, right? Have like time freedom with the financial freedom, or literally being stuck operating your portfolio. This is the reason why it's so important to outsource this stuff. The reason why I like to utilize PadSplit in addition to property management, as opposed to just having pure property managers without any PadSplit, is I'm getting all of my data for every single property in one dashboard. When you have property managers, you don't get to see real-time data. They tend to provide you the data after the fact, right? The month is over, they've reconciled everything. 2 weeks later, you're getting the data on how everything performed. Or a month later, a couple weeks after the month ends, or however they do it. And every single property manager in each different market might have a different way of presenting that information. So for me, what PadSplit does is not only help make property management better and easier overall, but it really provides me the insight I need in my portfolio as close to real time as possible to know the most important metrics. Are my units filled? Are my tenants paying my income? I can see that at any moment I open up my PadSplit dashboard. I can see that for every single one of my co-living properties on PadSplit. Well, if it's with a property manager separate from PadSplit, well, I got to get that data separately. I got to analyze that separately, which makes it that much more difficult, that much more friction when it comes to owning a large portfolio. So simply, why am I willing to pay let's say 12% to PadSplit over just paying a property manager, right? Because remember, it's like 12%, but then I got to pay another 5% to a property manager on the back end. So in total, it's 17%. So why am I willing to do that over maybe finding someone that'll do it between 12 to 20% to do all of the work instead of having two different entities? Well, I just kind of gave it to you. It's because they make the operations that much more successful. My observation has been that that PadSplit does a much better job of getting tenants to find and apply for your properties for rent by the room than any property manager that we have worked with or communicated with in any single one of the core PadSplit markets. If it's a market like Charlotte, which is an expanding co-living market, a growing PadSplit market, right? Because they came into it later. Well, they have some really solid property managers in that market. They might actually have a competitive advantage, and those property managers might even do better than PadSplit for now. But PadSplit continues to drive more and more money into a market to get more advertising. A real case example is our first property in Savannah, Georgia, was a brand new PadSplit market. Well, actually, even before PadSplit was operational there, we had it listed independently, tried to communicate with property managers. They weren't very good at that there at finding those tenants. So we said, fine, we have the infrastructure to do it ourselves independently. With my team, we could just do it independently to my asset manager and our VA on the property management side. Well, it was pretty freaking hard. It is hard to coordinate on a 10-bedroom house, all the individual units coming, all the individual applicants, getting all the listings up there, getting all the listings, every individual applicant, doing all the leases, collecting all the income. I said, hey, PadSplit, as someone who owns lots of properties in your platform, as someone who's provided you guys so much value to your business, just like they've done to my business, my request is that you expand what you're doing in Savannah. Well, the first 2 weeks, not only did we get similar tenant demand, but we had the process way easier. So we didn't have to do all these individual listings and all that. Everything was done easier. So the first 2 weeks PadSplit started in that market, they didn't really boost the number of tenants applying. They just made the operations easier, already worth it. Well, secondarily, after 2 weeks, after their ads start going and running and more Savannah, Georgia residents understand what PadSplit is, well, now they completely dominate. They're able to fill up the house, right? We had so many applicants. We're able to fill up the house the next 2 weeks. And now it's almost 100% occupancy at all times. Literally, as soon as someone moves out, someone new is ready to move in at all times. Or as soon as someone's interested in moving out, it's already someone new is interested in moving in. So I say all that to say a big part of why I still utilize PadSplit, even though there's a cost, there's a cost for all of it, whether it's your time or your money, right? Well, when you're comparing to another full property manager versus PadSplit and property management, why do I still choose to utilize PadSplit instead of full-time property management? Well, because of that, I think PadSplit tends to be much better than property managers at finding prospective tenants that want rent by the room in a market. Not only do they tend to pay more, but like the tenants are willing to pay more typically, but they also just have a larger volume of prospective tenants. That means that you get to choose better tenants to move into your properties, right? Is that understood? So I think they just do a better job of finding tenants, and then they make it much easier operationally for me to understand the success of my portfolio, as opposed to 10 different property managers with all their own dashboards and tools and delays and whatever. It's easier and better for me as a successful large co-living portfolio owner to see all of my data in real time and ensure the success of my portfolio much better, and ensure that I'm actually getting higher rents and filling up my units. That's where PadSplit is worth it for me, 100%. And that's what you're paying for when you pay for PadSplit. So I hope I summarized briefly. I mean, it's kind of extensive, but I hope I summarized why I love to utilize PadSplit for operations, the time that you're paying them. What we didn't even dive into is what's next. How and why I love to utilize PadSplit, not just for operations on owned assets, but on the acquisition side of things. This is where I feel like if you're not utilizing PadSplit and you want to do rent by the room, right, co-living, if you want to do co-living and you're not utilizing PadSplit, you're doing an insane disservice to yourself and to your business. Why? Because literally for free, you can get some of the most important data about any single market through PadSplit. Every single thing that you need to understand about co-living in a market can come through the PadSplit platform, and who better than the #1 platform for co-living in our country. So you're getting all of this data given to you for free for creating a free host account on PadSplit. Before I proceed with that, I'm going to make sure I give you guys the link to create your free account on PadSplit, so then you can actually run through some of this stuff with me. And I'm going to literally just break it down for you all right now. So if you'd like to follow along, make sure you set up your PadSplit account, but also we're going to go through my real estate freedom community and the trainings and education and the links in there so you can see how to do this stuff for yourself. So let's start with some screen share. Excellent. So we're in my free real estate freedom community, and we're going to go to classroom. Actually, I'll add it in here too, the real estate 101 section. So this is more for us buyers, right? There's active income. So those of you looking for active income, for example, through bird dogging, finding deals that make sense for buyers and then selling it to them, right? Making some active income while developing the skills of how to find great opportunities. Capital partners. So for those of you that are interested in being more passive, you want to get the benefits of real estate without doing all the work of finding, analyzing, getting the funding, the buying, the operations. You want the returns. That's what that's for, right? Whole training on how to do that, how to be a capital partner. But also, there's a lot of my capital partners that initially partner with me, not because they want to be passive forever, but instead they want to be passive early on to learn from me, to develop their own skills and knowledge and have ownership of co-living before they start actively buying deals themselves. Well, that's what this is. So let me show you what it looks like from what your perspective would look like. That's what this is if you want to be the actual buyer of deals. So there is traditional real estate investing breakdowns and some real estate breakdown here. Creative real estate investing, so like analysis and that kind of stuff. And then a whole co-living 101 training section. So what I'm going to do is we went to the active investing real estate 101 co-living resources. What you're going to want to do I think it dropped. Let me try it again. So I'm going to run through that again real fast, right? If you're in the real estate freedom community, absolutely free tools, trainings, resources for you guys. There is some paid stuff in there. You do not have to sign up for anything paid ever. It just, if you want more value, more tools, more resources, go for it. It's for your advantage if you choose to. With that being said, we're going to go in the community, go to Classroom. So like if you want to sign up for the full CoLiving Freedom community, right? You can do that. A to Z, step-by-step, everything about CoLiving, plus live weekly support calls. If you want the recordings from our last 3-day CoLiving challenge, plus hundreds of dollars of CoLiving tools and resources, you can literally unlock that for $47 and have access to all the previous challenges and live Q&As I've done for these challenges. So there's over 6 live Q&As in there, answers almost every question people ask anyway, right then and there about CoLiving. But there's a lot of free stuff as well. So let's go to the free stuff. Real Estate 101, and it's going to look like this for you, right? Whatever. Then you're going to go to CoLiving 101. Just click CoLiving Training, must watch. Definitely watch that. It's to your advantage. And then you're going to click here for free CoLiving resources, highlight in the training, pop you up here. PadSplit. Just click that. So you have to create your free host account. If you don't already have a PadSplit account, you have to create this. If you already have one, well, you can click the next link. Let's go here. And, oh, you know what's so funny? Let's see. Let me do this. Let me add it. PadSplit host map. I'm going to add it in here for you guys right now. So you can just click that, and that will take you to this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful map. If you're anything like me, this map is one of the best things you could possibly have access to if you're doing co-living investing. Why? Because PadSplit, the #1 freaking platform for co-living, rent by the room, right? Literally tells you, gives you access to all of their core data, all their core market insights data. Every single blue bubble here is a core PadSplit market. Every single gray bubble is an emerging market. That means it's a market that there might be some properties or there might be some upcoming, where blue is they already have an established market there. It does not mean that every single blue one has thousands of units or thousands of tenants, right? But it does mean that they've already been more established, and the core markets are where they're already actively spending advertising dollars to drive more and more tenants, where the gray ones, the emerging, are where people who want to invest in co-living are starting to add properties, and that is where they start driving more and more tenants. It's actually funny enough, even though we have properties here, because there's not a ton in here in this market right now, between active units, I mean, we basically make up most of this. There might be one other house there. You can see, even that's still gray, right? Compared to like in Atlanta, where it's got tons of data. So first and foremost, they help you understand which market should you choose to invest in. I'm not the guy who wants to reinvent the wheel. Quite honestly, every time, real estate investing is hard enough. Real estate investing already has inherent risk involved. From buying the deals, from the tenants, right? It's a human business between the tenants, the managers, the service providers, all that stuff. But also when it comes to the analysis, you're analyzing a market to see, is this a good market? How much rent could I project to make? How many of my rooms are likely to be filled in this market? So what is my vacancy? All of that stuff is important to understand. And it's really hard trying to invest if you don't have access to that data. Well, this is where PadSplit dominates, in the sense of you're not choosing from 50 states to invest in. If your goal is to just invest in existing markets because there's less risk, because there's more data, you minimize risk through more data, more accurate data. Well, instead of 50 states, you just break it down to look at which ones have core markets. Which of these states of the 50, how many of them have core markets? So instead of trying to invest in 50 states, you have maybe 15 to choose from. Then you start comparing market by market. Plus, if you have competitive advantages, I had a conversation with an investor yesterday who's looking to get into co-living, but this is not a brand new investor. He has 200 properties in San Antonio, 200 investments in San Antonio already, and now he wants to go into co-living. And I'm going to teach him how to do it, which is awesome for both of us. And He lives in San Antonio. Well, I'm not one to say invest in your local market. I say invest in the market that makes the most sense for you as an investment. I personally told him I'm not a huge fan of San Antonio's data relative to Houston and relative to Dallas. So if I was to choose to invest in markets in Texas, I would invest in Dallas and Houston. This is exactly the reason why I own in Dallas and Houston, but not in San Antonio and Austin, because of the data. Well, that's different, however, right? You might say, okay, these are the best two markets in Texas, and you chose Texas, but he's got a massive competitive advantage in San Antonio. He knows how to find great opportunities. He's done dozens of flips and BRRRR deals and all that. He's got deal flow. He's got his teams ready. So even though the data is not as good in San Antonio, we went through the process of determining it's still a good market, maybe not the best in Texas, still a good market, and his local competitive advantages made it way better for him to invest there and try to do this from the ground up elsewhere. Does that make sense a little bit? I'm just trying to highlight that, yes, you look at the data for sure, but sometimes there might be competitive advantages where you have to step away from the data and say, hey, I'm going to choose to invest in the market that makes the most sense for me holistically, not just the number one data-based market in PadSplit. Okay, just highlighting that because I'm not all or nothing, for example. But if you're brand new and you don't have hundreds of properties or even dozens or even a single property, or you don't have fix and flip experience or massive resources, you're trying to choose a market, well, I recommend you just choose the best market based on the data. For me, I love Atlanta. I love Atlanta, the number one original co-living market. And I love Dallas. These are my two favorite markets and where we're growing and expanding much faster than in any other market. Basically, I said I own in over a dozen states, and that's all types of strategies, but co-living in like 8 states, maybe a dozen cities. But these are my two favorite. Plus, I like Orlando because I'm a creative finance guy, and I think there's a lot of creative finance opportunities in Florida. These failed short-term rentals that I get to buy and convert to co-living. That is also a reason why I love Orlando, even though its data is not as good, in my opinion, as Dallas or Atlanta. So you have to make a decision on where you want to invest. Well, it's a lot easier when you have data and you've already simplified it from 50 states to a dozen. And then you're just looking at the cities that make sense for you between the data, plus between where you might have some operational advantages or some strategic advantages, right? For deal flow in Orlando, for the best markets in Atlanta and Dallas for me. So this is literally all for free. You can just see all this stuff. And when you click any single market, you don't just get state data, you get literally granular data. You can see for the city of Atlanta, they have 9,872 active units. What does that mean? 9,872 rooms for rent on their platform, right? Not actively for rent, but they did have them. That's the total number of rooms available. No, available is not the right word. That's the total number of rooms in that market on PadSplit. Doesn't mean they're rented or not. Just means they're in that market. And then 322 upcoming units. So they roughly have 10,000 units that are there, rooms that are there or upcoming being added on within the next 30 days, like in their pipeline already on the platform. So there's 10,000 searching in Atlanta, or there's 10,000 rooms in Atlanta. Well, this is even more important. It's great to understand when you're trying to invest in a market that there's a lot of operators in that market. One of the biggest things you can do, in my opinion, is invest in established markets that still have a big discrepancy between the supply versus the demand. So for us, the supply is co-living rooms versus the demand of tenants looking for those rent by the room rooms, right? So you want to make sure you're already operating in an established market. That minimizes your risk as your data becomes more and more accurate. And it's already proven that, hey, this is a market in which whatever the regulations say or whatever, right, in there, if they have occupancy laws or whatever they have, it's not heavily enforced because there's 10,000 active units. We divide that by 7. I don't know what that number is, but it means there's almost 1,500 homes, 1,400 homes right now in this market right now that are being rented by the room, totaling around 10,000 active units. So that means that the local regulatory, whatever, because it depends on where you're operating, whether it's a county regulation, a state, city, whatever the regulations are, in this market, 10,000 rooms are available, 1,500 houses are available, maybe by 1,000 investors, right? 500 to 1,000 investors have those 1,400 homes in this market through PadSplit. That's a pretty good sign. That's they're not going to come and crack down on my specific property, and the regulations in there probably will not regress and make it more difficult for co-living or rent by the room operators. Why? Because that means 10,000 tenants getting affordable housing through rent by the room would be out in the streets if they crack down on that. So which local regulatory champion is going to push towards putting 10,000 people who are struggling to afford housing out in the streets now? That's part of my thought process in regards to regulatory feasibility of investing in a market. Some markets are like Colorado, where they say, hey, no occupancy laws. Just make sure you're doing the right thing by your properties, building codes, health and safety. Awesome, right? Well, most of them are not. They have occupancy laws like Atlanta. So a big way to minimize the risk of that is operating in markets that have occupancy laws, but they already have an established tenant, or they have an established base of other investors that are already operating there. Not only does that minimize the risk, but it also maximizes the number of resources you can tap into, right? You can reach out to other investors and learn more about, hey, do you own in the zip code? And what are you seeing for utility expenses? Hey, do you have any insurance providers or any insurance recommendations? All the same stuff people ask us in my co-living freedom community and what we help you out with. Because when you get stuck, the best person to learn from and ask for support are those that are already doing what you want to be doing, where you want to be doing it, right? I don't get advice from anyone who isn't already doing what I want to do at a higher level than I'm doing it right now. And I recommend the same. And that's exactly what happens here in the co-living freedom community. And that's exactly what happens when you are operating in markets with multiple investors, right? You're tapping into those resources is the idea there. So you get the state data, right? Or the city data, right? So we said state, click a city, see the number of units, see the demand. So even though there's 10,000 units, well, in the last 30 days, it says calculate by the number of unique searches in the past 30 days. In the last 30 days, 120,000 unique visitors searched in the Atlanta market for rent by the room. Not on the map like this, but as a prospective tenant relative to the 10,000 active units. I hear all the time, isn't Atlanta saturated? Isn't there too many properties that are co-living? Well, there's 12 times the number of people in the last 30 days that have searched the number of rent by the room housing in total in Atlanta. So is it saturated? No, it's probably one of the best markets for co-living as a result of so much discrepancy between the number of tenants looking, right? So they're using demand opposite. Well, they're using it, in the same sense. I don't know if it was the same sense as I just used it before, but this is tenants looking for housing, and this is the number of units available. So supply versus the demand by tenants. What's a massive discrepancy? That's a great market to invest in, not only because it's an established market that needs affordable housing, but there's still a massive discrepancy between the number looking versus what is available. Not only that, if you see the average occupancy is 85%, right? Most co-living investors don't think this way. So please take this as a major cheat code for you. Well, there's 10,000 units. Well, if 85% of them are occupied, that means only 15% are available of the 10,000. 15% isn't 10,000. It's 1,500 that are available. 1,500 are searching, or 120,000 are searching for 1,500 units, not 10,000. So supply and demand is even greater than you originally thought, because it's not the number of units literally available for rent. It's 85% of these units are what's available for rent for the 120 plus thousand that have searched in the last 30 days. Understand that with supply and demand. It's not just units as supply and demand for demand. Well, it's units times the occupancy or the vacancy, right? 100% minus the occupancy is the vacancy. That is how you know how many units are actually available in that market. So you have a true understanding of the demand by tenants and the actual supply. On top of that, if you've ever seen some people's listings, you'll understand why 50% of those that are available will probably never get rented. Between the way they price it, the photos, the communications by the owners, there's a variety of reasons why a lot of these properties sit, and they sit for a very long time. and you have the ability to actually look at that data, that's going to be the last thing we do to round this out. The other thing that's very important is the weekly room prices. So the way PadSplit supports me for free, right? For free with that host account is I understand the supply currently, the units times the vacancy. I understand the demand, so I understand the supply and demand when trying to select a market, A, state, B, city. And this all benefits my ability to analyze because now I also have, if I'm going to invest in a market, I have the average per week income if you have a shared bathroom, the average per week income if you have a private bathroom. So, right, a room with a shared bathroom obviously rents for less, and they have that data for Atlanta. If it's a private bathroom, they have that data for Atlanta, plus the average occupancy. You have that data. Where does that become relevant? Well, if you don't already have the free CoLiving calculator, right, in those resources under CoLiving resources, get that calculator for literally free. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here. So in the calculator, right, you need to understand the deal and the acquisition and all that kind of stuff, right? The deal, the financing, how many rooms you have to convert, all that stuff. But for the sake of what PadSplit can do for me is help me decide, should I invest in that market, right, based on the data, but then be able to analyze how many private bathrooms do I have, right? One in this example, it rents for $265 on average. 7 that are shared bathrooms that rent for $193. That translates into, if you're paying $265 a week, that's $1148 a month. $193 a week is $836 a month. So this gets you your monthly income. And then you understand how much income am I projected to make each month, right? By just having the number of rooms, whether it's private and shared, and the actual rates that are provided to you by PadSplit. And on top of that, one of the biggest things to account for is reserves that you're setting aside for vacancy, because your income is not going to be this. Your income is this minus the vacancy, right? Because it's not like your properties are full 100% of the time. So this being vacant 8% of the time, it's really the 7,003, right? This minus this vacancy, what you're deducting away for vacancies, it's actually 6442 of income. And all that data comes from PadSplit. The income and the vacancy, which is literally just 100% minus occupancy. Does that make sense? Because they're giving you the occupancy. So the vacancy here is 15%. 100% minus 85% is 15% vacancy. So you have to subtract that away from your income. That's part of your reserves that you're setting aside when you're analyzing. Well, that's great. I understand this for all of Atlanta, Georgia. But if you look here, when I was first investing in Atlanta, it was like this, right? There was just like this area. Well, look at how far, I mean, they're going secondary and tertiary markets as well. And it's not good enough to just look at the city data. Well, they give you literally zip code by zip code data. So not just the full city data. You can see if you're buying here in 30316, you get that number of units, occupancy, income there for that zip code. College Park, right? And I own a property here. You get the data in this market specifically, zip code by zip code. And as you have actual deals you analyze, you can reach out to your PadSplit representatives and say, hey, I'm looking at a property in this market. It seems to be a good fit based on the zip code and city data, right? So the more granular city zip code data. And then you can ask them for more specific information when you provide them the address that you're operating in. If you are buying a property here above the highway, let's say, the income and occupancy and all that's probably different than, let's say, all the way down here. So you can actually reach out to the representatives and ask them, hey, I'm looking at a property here. Do you have any more neighborhood specific or nearby properties for me to compare to? How much are those ones investing? Or how many of those properties are rented out and how fully, right? Or how many properties are there first and foremost, right? How many of those are filled and what is their occupancy? What are they getting specifically for rental income collection? And also, is there anything that you're seeing that is specific about this area, the amenities or whatever for your local competition that you want to match their furnishings, their amenities, or exceed it so your properties can rent for more, tenants will fill it up faster, and they'll stay longer because you're providing them a better product in that area that they already want to live in. So that is from the host map. Like I said, I utilize PadSplit for the operational benefits as well. The property management support that they do, right? They don't do all of it, as we talked about. They are the equivalent of Airbnb for short-term rentals, is what PadSplit is for rent by the room or co-living. Then they also help with the acquisitions, right? Because that starts with selecting where you're going to invest. State, city, get data to compare the different areas. And then when it comes to acquisitions and analysis, well, I get all the data that I need to be able to analyze the things that are more difficult to find, right? This information is very difficult to find. I can go on Zillow right now, and actually I will just go on Zillow right now just to show you. Let me get out of this. We're going to go here. I'm going to say, so I can go to Atlanta, Georgia. I can erase all my filters and say, hey, I'm looking for rent. I don't care about the price. I want property type. You just go to room for rent. And you can see this data here, but this is so much harder to utilize. A, because this is just showing you what's available for rent and what they're listing it for, but it's not aggregating this data for you. So you're gonna need another tool to help you aggregate that data and get some analysis behind it. But it does help you see the competition, right? The other properties there to see what they look like so you can compare and contrast, especially if you're looking this market, that market. So I utilize both, don't get me wrong. However, I'm trying to make determination and get the data. This is telling me exclusively what is available. They're not telling me like PadSplit what the data that is like actual, right? Not what is available and what they want to rent it for, but instead they're telling me all the properties in the market, all the people searching. They're telling me how much they're getting per week, right? They don't do per month, per week on the PadSplit platform. That's why my calculator translates it to per month, because that's how we analyze deals, right? Not by per week. And then I get to understand, well, how many of those are occupied? What are they getting in income? Not just what do they want in income, because anyone can list whatever they want, right? So you have to kind of make a lot more extra. I mean, you just can't get the same data. And that's where PadSplit really helps massively. On top of that, I said I'll show you guys one more thing, and that's how I want to close it off. Not only do they help me when it comes to the operations for these properties to support property management and the acquisition side of thing with the data analysis, well, it further helps me understand how best to invest in a market. So for example, if I just type in Atlanta, Georgia, I can see it the way a tenant would see it. And yes, now I'm one of the unique visitors of that 10,000 or 120,000 that search. So I'm part of that data now. But I can see, just like on Zillow, all the ones that are available, and they're saying, I think they just saw, there are 1,249 rooms starting at $99 per week. So it's telling me the lowest rental amount and the number of rooms. What it's not saying is that some of these are rented out. Let me see. Oh no, these are the actual vacant rooms available, and that makes sense, right? This tie it in. That's how I came to that conclusion about what I told you guys, the cheat code I just gave you guys, which is there's not 10,000 units. There's 15% of 10,000 units, or 15% of 9872, right? That roughly translates to this 1,249, right? It's not 10,000 rooms available. It's what's available that is not available, is not what's listed as available. It's what are still not occupied, 1,249. Well, then I can look specifically at the different properties I'm going to buy here. I can see, okay, what do the other properties look like here? What have they gone for? Right? You can go similarly and see what they've gone for. And just as importantly, what are their amenities? Oh, if I'm seeing price drops, are they having a hard time filling up that room at that price point? Why? They have 4 rooms available. You just click that and get some better data on that property. Well, what do I think is going on here? Well, it looks like people don't like this home. I can read, maybe it's this specific person, because furnishing wise, it's sparse, but it's fine. I mean, they don't need to really do a ton more than this. You could see the rooms and the different price points they have and the different amenities and whatever that's included in the different price points there. You can see the reviews, need some improvement, do not rent this property, yada, yada, whatever. You can see all that stuff there and understand what is and is not working. If they're responding within 7 hours, right? Maybe they're slower. than they could be. I could even see the management team and see, what other properties they have. You could get a lot of data from this side of things. Very important to look at. And like I said, just as importantly, I can see what are some of the extra features. Like I just clicked another one, right? Okay, what are the features that seem to do well? This one's very popular, 691 views today. Well, it was at the top, so I don't know why, but it was at the top. And maybe it's the price point, right? You can see and understand this stuff at a much better level. And they're saying they have more than one fridge. Maybe that's part of it, right? Maybe it's the photos, it's the listings. At the same time, you can sort by recently added and see what are the newer stuff coming online, but also look at some of the older ones that were added a while ago. And it's literally telling you the ones that were added a while ago, are there some that are like this one, right? Alert me when I can book. This is the advantage that you don't get from Zillow. From Zillow, you're going to see what's available for rent. There's no way to see what was available for rent or what rented. Well, PadSplit is literally showing you, alert me when I can book. That means that it's literally rented out already. I think it just reset me, but let's see. It's telling me this one is full, right? Alert me when I can book means that it's full. So why did this one rent for 283? This one's 257. This one's 4. What was about these ones? They got rented and filled up right away. Is it that they're in this particular pocket, right? You can see that with the clocks. Is it that they're in this particular pocket? Is it that they're whatever? You can get that extra data to be able to make better informed decisions, not just from the data on the owner and like the owner side, the landlord side, the whatever, the host side, but also from the side of the tenant. And that gives you a lot of information that is not as accessible there. It also even tells you, did you know that the median one bedroom apartment in Atlanta is $1,534? So if my goal to provide successful affordable housing is provide close to a 30% reduction on what someone's paying in their utilities or in their total rent, I know that if I can accomplish that, let's see, times 0.7, so 70%. So if I'm able to provide people housing for $1,073 or less, I'm really helping them get that affordable housing, meaning I'm actually providing them affordable housing. It's part of the metrics of choosing a market to invest in. You shouldn't have properties that need to rent for, their rent that you're collecting as co-living needs to be lower than what the median there is. And the bigger the spread between what you're offering versus what the average is, the more likely there is a massive demand for people looking for affordable housing. If you're able to really undercut what everyone else is charging for a one bedroom, for rent by the room, that makes rent by the room even more and more valuable. All right. And this will tell you even more stuff here, but we're not going to get into the weeds of that. It's the photos and the listing. It's like, oh, well, this one's only got one room and it looks fairly simple. What made this one good? Right. And then what's making the best ones versus the bad ones? You can also go more granular, like, oh, if it has a private bathroom versus, is it private bathrooms versus shared, to compare those ones in particular. Is it those that don't have fees or whatever? Hide the ones that are coming soon, because that's going to skew some of the data. You can compare and contrast, because like I want queen beds or larger, but I can also see, well, how many of the ones that are available have smaller beds? It's probably a good sign. Oh, there's only 3. They're catching on, right? It's probably a good sign, 3 that are available, but there's not even a ton. It's 1 page, but I showed occupied homes. It's still not a ton. It's showing that the majority are homes that are that have larger beds. So it's a good sign that if you're going to buy co-living in this market, you should buy a queen size or larger, because the majority of the properties in this market are queen size. So you're competing at a much better level. Your goal when it comes to property management, in theory, you want to be the best of the best possible. When it comes to renovating and furnishing your properties, understand that if all the data that we see are the averages, right? Well, if you're exceeding averages, if you're getting averages, great. Your returns are going to look just like your averages. But if you're able to create properties that exceed the averages, that's how you get tenants paying you more than the average. Like most of ours, they pay more than the average. But more importantly, we have a much higher occupancy. Our tenants are filling up our houses and staying a lot longer than the average, because our properties are furnished better than the average and they're managed better than the average. So if you understand what the average is, what the average property looks like, and what the average income and occupancy is, I still analyze for the average, but I know we're typically going to exceed that because our properties are going to rent for more, and people are going to stay longer. They're going to move in sooner, and they're going to stay longer, meaning there's less vacancy when they move out and all the turnover costs. All that is a massive benefit to successfully owning your asset. And this is where PadSplit makes all of this in one ecosystem so much better. I'm not telling you to utilize them for property management or not. That's up to you. If you want to do any of the approaches, if you want to fully self-manage, fully have a property manager do it. If you want to utilize PadSplit and self-manage on the back end, utilize PadSplit and have a property manager on the back end. For me, I know the best thing for us to do is PadSplit plus property management because I care about time freedom and I have enough cash flow when I'm analyzing deals that I'm already accounting for those expenses. It's imperative that I do that so I can spend more time and energy finding more deals, raising more money, and honestly enjoying more of my life. More of the money that I'm earning, I'm actually getting to enjoy more of it. Does that make sense? And that's why I go this route. And because I own a multiple markets, I get all that data in real time in one central place. Okay. That's why I choose to utilize them. They have a competitive advantage, even though they have a cost. I think they have an advantage in their core markets and driving more tenants that are also typically willing to pay more. Because I've noticed there's, on Zillow, sometimes people are searching for the cheapest possible property. Well, on PadSplit, that's not always the case. That price is a big consideration for sure, but some people are looking for value. It's not just pure price. It's what am I getting in exchange for how much I'm paying? And that's where a lot of PadSplit tenants look. Some people are literally looking for the cheapest. Don't get me wrong. They're just going to say, hey, sort by the lowest one. I want the cheapest possible one. But you're going to realize not every single lowest possible one is fully full, right? There's a lot that are full, but it's not just because they are the lowest possible one that they're all full, right? It could be what they're getting in exchange for that. This one's a good combo because this one's a nice looking property and it's low income or it's low cost relative to the market. However, they seem to have some pretty terrible reviews. And I could see like, oh, what's making this property much worse for everyone else? Because the photos look good, in my opinion. It's got the 2 fridges, but what makes this one terrible? Well, it's right next to the bus stop, right near the airport. Well, that's College Park, right near the airport. It's probably this management team that we keep seeing over and over again for some of these bad listings, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, there you go. Cockroaches, lack of cleanliness, all of that stuff. And maybe they're highlighting the interior photos, but it sounds like people are complaining about the exterior photos of the property, right? So maybe these rooms are just too small. They're maximizing room count to drive more income, but it's costing them and significantly more vacancy and turnover because their rooms might be too small, or they're not furnishing them well enough, or it's the cleanliness. All those things gives me much better insight between the PadSplit, what they do for operations, but also how they support me with acquisitions, right? The data to analyze my deals, and then the data to be able to say, hey, what should I be doing? What should I do to meet the market averages? Because if I'm analyzing for averages, how do I at least meet those averages? In what do the average properties look like? What are they pricing for? What furnishings do they have? What amenities do they have? How close are they to certain things? And then saying, well, how can I exceed those averages? Like I said, if everyone's doing twin beds there and I'm going queen, typically someone's going to want the better room. Or if I have better amenities or I have better photos, all those things make it so that our tenants are more likely to move in faster, pay a premium, stay longer, and all that means less loss due to vacancy and turnover. PadSplit is that ecosystem that allows for all that to be done much better. And for someone like me who owns in multiple markets, it's really nice to be able to see every single thing in one particular dashboard, not through all these different platforms and management summary emails and their own tools. Because like I said, at the end of the day, if I underwrite my properties well, right, with accuracy, right, things change, right? Income can go up or down, expenses go up and down, whatever. But if I underwrote well, all I need to do is ensure are my rooms filled, are my rooms occupied, and are we collecting rents? If our rooms are filled and we're collecting rents, it's a very good indicator before you even look deep into the numbers that your properties are performing. That's what I get to oversee in one easy platform. Are my rooms filled or do we have a lot of vacancy? Are my tenants paying or do we have a lot of non-paying tenants or no income because of vacancies, right? Bleeds into that. And then what do our tenants for all the different properties and all the different areas, what do they think about these properties? They're not listing it on the property management platform. They're providing the feedback on here so we know, is the property manager taking care of these units or not? Because it's all done through here. A property manager cannot pick and choose the information I see. They cannot manually move numbers around. I get to see that in real time and make determination in real time. Are we doing well? All of that is a big reason why I've been able to grow and scale at such a faster level than most investors, without a doubt, in co-living. But that's because I combine it with creative finance and capital raising, making it so I can buy any great deal, and I can, because I can raise money for great deals, right? And I make my deals even better, right? Instead of getting $1,000 a month in cash flow, creative, I can get $2,000 a month in cash flow. Instead of 10% cash on cash return, get 20, 25+% cash on cash return, right? So I can buy more deals, operate them better, and have them provide even better results as a result of my full strategy, the super investor strategy. But co-living through PadSplit makes that much more possible. From the operations side, to track the performance of my properties, but also to make them perform at a higher level, to be able to analyze markets and properties with much more certainty, and to compare and contrast to other properties in that market. So I know the level I should be renovating and furnishing my properties to at least meet the averages, if not exceed them. So with that, what we'll do as a part 2 is I will go through and I will answer every single one of the questions that have come in this week and that are going to come in through the Real Estate Freedom community. I'll put this video in the Real Estate Freedom community, and every single comment in there, every question that gets asked, I will answer those specifically for you guys in regards to property management operations. All right. So that being said, if you're not part of the Real Estate Freedom community, you are massively missing out on free real estate education, resources, co-living education and resources, whether you're focused on active income, passive investing, or actively investing. So active income, right? Exchanging your hustle and your skills for money to develop even more skills, right? Active income, bird dogging. Passive investing, where you're doing it to get the benefits of real estate investing. You provide the money, we bring the deals, and we handle all the operations. You could be doing that for the passive returns, cash flow, ownership benefits, all that, to purely benefit from that. Or you're doing that to learn, so you can not only passively invest and get the returns on this one deal, but you can learn how to do it over and over again for yourself. Or you just want to go purely to active investing, right? Actually being the one to find and buy these deals, analyze, buy these deals and operate them. Well, that's what this does for you as well. So all of that is in there for you to take advantage of. And if you want to get to the next level, well, that's what the Co-Living Freedom community is for in regards to co-living. If you're already an established investor and you want to grow and scale your investment portfolio, right, through getting better at getting co-living deals and analyzing them better and improving the returns, combining that with creative financing, but also getting more deal flow that's creatively financed, analyzing them effectively, raising the money for those deals, and operating your properties at the highest level possible and your business overall, well, that's what the Super Investors Mastermind community is for. I'm here to help you guys out wherever you're at in your journey. So much of what I give away is absolutely for free to help you guys move up the real estate freedom roadmap. And if you have the finances and the desire to push forward and invest in yourself so you can do better when it comes to investing, buy better deals more frequently with less risk, well, that's what the communities are for. Co-Living Freedom community, step-by-step blueprint on everything co-living, literally A to Z with all my tools and resources, plus multiple lively support calls. And then the Super Investors community, if it's not about buying your first or next co-living deal, but it's about building the full portfolio, because you're going to need to raise money. You're going to want to do creative deals because they get you better returns. And you're going to want to not just operate your properties well, but also operate your business well, so that once you are financially free, you also have the very important time freedom. All right. So with all that being said, please take advantage of all the free resources I provide you guys. At minimum, the Real Estate Freedom Roadmap community and my YouTube channel, to at least just get, literally people pay. So someone's charging $30,000 to teach co-living. It's crazy. I give you more away for free than what people probably charge for, let alone what we give in our paid stuff at much lower cost. So with that being said, appreciate you guys. enjoy. And then we'll do part 2 is answering all of the questions that are going to come in, that have come in, and also those that will come in over the next week that we'll do during the Q&A. If you're watching the replay, please make sure to drop a comment, go to the video, drop a comment on what questions can I answer for you so that I can answer those for you during the next training. All right. And I'll post those as well. With that, appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next time.